This is the Chamberlink, connecting community, creating impact with Tyler Fischbach.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Chamberlink. We're here today with episode number 14, and I'm very excited about this one because this is the biggest project that we've discussed on the show, and so I'm really looking forward to unpacking that with our guests today. And before I introduce them, I mean, really, this episode doesn't need too much background on it per se about the importance of it. But what I will say, and you'll know what I'm talking about here in a second, is, speaking regionally, I think there is so much significance that comes with a flood. And in the Red River Valley, we're not strangers to that. And the impact that, whether it's a 100-year flood or a 500-year flood, how that can completely devastate a region. And people in the Fargo-Moorhead, they're very familiar with that. You think about Grand Forks, there's just a lot of memory there. And so I'm really excited today to talk about the FM Diversion project and the updates on that, because it is a transformational project for our region. I mean, this is such a big deal. And so I'm really proud to be able to talk about that with you guys today. And so I'm not going to steal any thunder here. I'm not going to get too much into it. I'm just going to introduce our guests and we're going to roll into it. And so I'm very excited today to have Tony Grindberg. And Tony is a Cass County Commissioner, and he's also the board chair of the Metro Flood Diversion Authority. So thank you, Tony, for being here. And we have Jason Benson, and Jason is the executive director of the Metro Flood Diversion Authority. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. And Jason, I want to kick this off with you because you've been the ED now since February, so a handful of months. And I'm very curious, and this will help our listeners really understand where you're coming from because you have a very impressive resume. So I'd love if you can kind of take us through your career about how you got to where you are today, because I think our listeners will really enjoy that piece of knowledge about you as we jump into the conversation.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Really appreciate you having us here today and again, talking about this important issue. So, I've been involved in local government for over 25 years. After graduating from NDSU in the mid-90s, I went on active duty in the Army as an officer and came out in 2000 and started working for the Highway Department for Cass County. And in 2011, took over as the Cass County engineer. And over my time as the Cass County engineer, a lot of focus was put on my time working on the diversion, especially from the technical standpoint. And because so many of the aspects of the diversion project are being constructed outside of the city limits, more in the rural parts of Cass County. And so having fought through the floods of 2009, 2010, 2011 as a staff member at the Highway Department, and getting sandbags delivered to those rural communities and subdivisions, as well as working directly with West Fargo and Fargo, cities of Harwood, Horace, Kindred, Castleton. All of that collaboration, coming out of those floods is like, we need to have permanent, reliable flood protection. Yeah. And that really got me excited when I took over as the county engineer in 2011 to really put a big focus of my time. And the county commission, throughout my time as a county engineer, really wanted me to especially from the technical standpoint, have a big focus. Mm-hmm. And so then last year, because I'm still in the Minnesota Army National Guard, last year I was deployed overseas. And the position came open, and I had the opportunity to apply, and actually did the interview from overseas, and
really?
On a Zoom meeting.
Wow.
And got offered the position, and got home from my deployment, took Christmas break off, and jumped right into the new job. So it's been fast paced, but it's been really exciting.
Wow, that's cool. No rest for the wicked, and thank you, sir, for your service. I did not know that, and so I appreciate that very much. Wow, that's a cool story. Okay, this is what I'm really curious about, Tony, and I think you might have some good background on this, because obviously the diversion project has made huge progress. I mean, that celebration that just happened, maybe that was two weeks ago or so. And so there's a lot that has unfolded over the years. Can you maybe kind of take us through, how did this come to be? When did conversations start getting really serious? What were some of those milestones over the years? Maybe they have to do with the legislature. Just think back even 15 years. How did this come to be, and what led up to there finally being a spade in the ground for the groundbreaking, so to speak?
Well, I think the history, shows that from the 1997 flood that as we know, that Grand Forks had a different outcome with the devastation that the flooding took on Grand Forks in 1997. You know, the immediacy of protecting the city of Fargo with Mother Nature and Mother Nature and the spring melt. You know, that proved to be a right decision to seal off the city, if you will. And what happened, though, of course, of weather, as the melt became more prominent, it became too much to manage further north, and that's what, you know, that bad flood in 97 in Grand Forks. Then look at 2009. Leadership in our community really started to look at alternatives to, particularly after 2009, when 6 million sandbags were assembled in a very short period of time to fight the flood back, when there were also calls to evacuate the city of Fargo in 2009. And so this whole discussion about what does a model look like, or a program or a project to divert the river, that started with our congressional members, state leaders, local leaders, which ultimately led to, you know, this idea of a diversion around the city. And it was really in the 2013 session, my last legislative session, where, as a member of the Senate Appropriations Committee, I had the water budget and worked with local leaders to carve out that first amount of state support for this project, recognizing there was a long runway yet to figure out details and what the overall plan was. But, you know, collectively with, you know, the leaders involved with this project, created the first public-private partnership under the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers of the United States of America. And so a lot of attention and enthusiasm around, could it be done faster and done cheaper if it's a public-private partnership, which is ultimately what prevailed in the model that we have, that over the board of directors of the Diversion Authority, 13 members oversee that, with collaboration between 2 states, 2 different counties and cities. It's really remarkable as a region what we've been able to accomplish in this project, let alone like the Chamber merging with Moorhead years ago and collaborating, and not really looking at the state boundary as an issue of dividing us, but more so uniting us.
Yep. Thank you for that background. And I do want to definitely jump into more of the partnership and, you know, the funding, and we'll get there. But after this break, I do want to dive into, you know, what's going to fascinate me is all of the workings of this project, because it's huge. And so I'm just curious, like, what are the nuts and bolts to it? So we'll jump into that after this break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Chamber Link. Today we are talking about the FM Area Diversion Project. And what I want to do, Jason, and you might like this because of your engineering background, but can you explain, because I know it's hard for me sometimes to explain to whether it's my parents or friends who aren't like in it and know what the project is. Can you just explain, what is it? How does it work? What's on the map? What does this look like? And just kind of from square one, explain what this is.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 4 main components to it. There's the dam or embankment. It's on the southern side of the community, and that runs from kind of southwest of Horace all the way into Minnesota, south of Comstock, Minnesota. Then there's the diversion channel, which is constructed by the P3 contractor, and that's got 9 different bridges between interstate bridges, railroad bridges, and county road bridges, and then the 2 aqueduct structures that carry tributary rivers over top of the diversion channel. And that's a 30-mile channel, and that runs from southwest of Horace all the way around to up in Argusville area, close to Georgetown, Minnesota, where it enters back into the Red River. And then we've got the in-town levees. So those are integral to the project, both on the Fargo and Moorhead sides of the river. And then there's the upstream mitigation area. That's also known as the staging area, and that's during a flood event, as the gates are partially closed on the Red River and the Wild Rice River, water will stack up and be stored south of the embankment and in that upstream mitigation area. As that water gets stored, then the gates at the inlet control structure south of Horace get opened, that releases water into the diversion channel and then takes that water around town. And during operation, we'll only operate on about a 20-year flood event. So that's a 37-foot flood through town. We'll hold the water coming through the Red River and the Wild Rice River at that 37 feet. And then anything above that will get stored south of the embankment and then metered through into the diversion channel and around. As the flood gets bigger and bigger, up to a 100-year flood event, it will continue to just be 37 feet through town, and more water will then be stored south and sent around town. But on a 500-year flood event, we also have the ability where we would be sending about a 40-foot flood through town, which is a foot below the 2009 flood, and then the rest would be stored south and then sent around. But again, the ability to, it's designed for that 100-year flood fight, but we've got the ability to protect against a 500-year flood and still have a foot below what we fought in 2009.
Wow. Thank you for that. And that's, I mean, I don't want to get too technical here, but I'm thinking of questions. How is that monitored? I mean, I'm assuming there's a lot of innovative ideas that you guys have going on over there, but is a lot of this automated? Like you get warnings that we're at a certain level? I'm just curious how all of that.
It's going to be a lot of collaboration with the National Weather Service and the USGS. They've got different monitors on and gauges on the rivers south of town, on the Red River and the Wild Rice. So we'll take those into account, and then we'll be adding additional river gauges at different points south of the embankment and on the Wild Rice structure and the Red River structure to be able to monitor what those flows are and make sure that we're controlling the flows properly as they go into the protected area. And then, we're also monitoring the flows through things like the aqueduct structures. Again, the diversion channel is about 30 feet deep, and the Maple River and Shine River are only about 15 feet deep. So these aqueduct structures carry the natural river flows of the Maple and Cheyenne over the diversion channel. Wow. There's only a few structures like it in the world that take natural river water over a man-made channel, but these are the only ones built in a cold weather environment, so they have to be heated in the winter so that they don't turn into a big ice block and that water continues to flow.
That never crossed my mind.
So they're very complex. So that makes this project, very unique. As Tony had mentioned earlier, just having this private-public partnership component to where the Corps of Engineers is using federal funding to construct the southern embankment and the Wild Rice and Red River structures. Then we're using local and state money to construct the private-public partnership, and that's the one big contract that we have with Red River Valley Alliance, and they've got ASN constructors. People might see the white pickups with ASN around town. That's the main contractor that's constructing the P3 diversion channels, the 30-mile channel plus all those bridges and aqueducts.
Wow, very good. Well, that makes me curious. So we have Red River Valley Alliance, we have ASN constructors, and this is just me being a layman, Tony. What is the MFDA's role in all of this? Obviously, Jason has tons of technical knowledge, clearly, but what is your guys' big role, I suppose, in shaping this and having oversight? I'm really curious about how that all fits together and what your guys' role is on the board.
Yeah, well, we're the legal authority established, for the project. I like to say one of our primary roles is protecting the taxpayers' interests, particularly through the construction period. There's numerous funding sources between the federal funding, state funding, local sales tax that voters have approved in the past for this project, to Minnesota funding. And so when you look at it from a financial perspective, we're the fiduciary of the project, and to make sure that we're getting what we asked for when we went out for a global bid for a developer to build the project, build the channel, work with us and the Army Corps of Engineers, and then with that comes a 30-year agreement to maintain it and operate it. So our primary role is the oversight of the financial and to keep everybody focused on the timetable and the project delivery date, and then work with our consultants as well as our quality staff that we have that leads this project. So typical board structure of any organization, but it's accountable at the end of the day to the taxpayers in this, because it's all taxpayer funds that have put this project forward.
Can you explain a little bit about that 30-year commitment? Because I'm learning a lot already this morning, and so I appreciate that very much. What are some of the big, rocks to that commitment? Obviously, the companies are sticking around, maintenance, so there's going to be workforce, but what does that entail, the 30-year commitment? Is it just...
Well, on the front end, and Jason can certainly augment here, on the front end, it was an expectation that the developer that was chosen will bring their own equity to this project as well. And with that, his overall financing model will work through the construction period, and then based on milestones of accomplishment, then will be reimbursed their costs and be receiving payments for their performance. And then over time, then they'll have an agreement that they'll get rewarded for that each year as they operate it. So it's a unique model created again with a public-private partnership in mind with local and federal and state. And so there's a lot of nuances to the agreement. In fact, Jason, I think the actual agreement with our developer is 16,000 pages. So when you look at the level of detail and the expectation, one can from your question earlier of the authority's role, but from a management standpoint, making sure we're adhering to the standards and the scope of work is crucial, so that when the project's finished, it's completed in a fashion that was set up and designed for.
Well, and we might run out of time before our next break, but I'll just get into it. So, well, what would you say the project completion is right now if you had to pick a percentage? I don't know if that's hard to do.
Yeah, we're pushing up around the 70% range right now.
That's fantastic. What are some of the large milestones left that need to happen between? Is it now in 2027 is the projected?
Yeah, so, on the southern embankment, the core lead features of the project, the Corps of Engineers is nearly complete with everything on the inlet control structure and wild rush control structure. We just opened the Red River control structure. They still have, 8 to 12 months to get everything finalized on that structure. And then they're constructing the embankment that has to go across the old Red River alignment and into Minnesota, and then the embankment. So over the next 12 months, they'll be finishing a lot of those embankment components. And so we expect that by next fall, virtually all of the earth construction down on the southern embankment will be complete. On the P3 diversion channel standpoint, we've been opening bridges this summer. We've got 4 of the 19 bridges complete. We're working really hard now to get the I-29 bridges open north of Harwood, then out by Mapleton, the I-94 bridges. We're working on railroad bridges. We expect most of our bridges to be open this fall. So whether it's on a county road, the interstate. So we're really excited about that, as well as this fall and into early winter to get the Maple River Aqueduct structure open. So then next year, we'll really be focused on connecting all of the channel and finishing the Cheyenne River Aqueduct kind of southwest of Horace. And, we've got 13 months to get all this done. So we're moving quick. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of contractors, a lot of earth that's getting moved. But, like with the P3 portion of the project, it's 45 million cubic yards of dirt that have to get moved. They've already moved over 36 million cubic yards. That's 1 million cubic yards is about the equivalent of a mile square, 1 foot deep. So right now, so you think about a whole section of land, 1 mile by 1 mile. We're about 36 feet deep, and we got 9 more feet to go. So we're going to get there on that dirt. We're getting there on these bridges, and then we still are doing some land acquisitions. There's a lot of other permitting, environmental, and other things that are going on behind the scenes that aren't as big and flashy, but are still requirements and things we have to get done.
Yep. Thank you for that. And thank you for explaining how much earth that really is, because 45 million doesn't even register in my mind. So thank you for that visual. That was very helpful. All right, we're going to hop to the news really quick, and then we will be right back. Welcome back. And we are having a great conversation today about the FM Area Diversion Project with Jason Benson, the Executive Director at the Metro Flood Diversion Authority, and Tony Grindberg, Cass County Commissioner and Board Chair of the Metro Flood Diversion Authority. And something actually just came to my mind over the break. I was chatting with Cale Dunwoody on our team. He's our Vice President of Public Policy. And I think we were talking about the housing situation in the region and different things going on in different cities. And we started talking about the FEMA certification. Can you kind of unpack what this project could mean when it comes to flood insurance and the FEMA certification? Because I'm no expert there, but I'd love to know more about that whole process and the impact of that.
Yeah. So, about 10 years ago or so, FEMA updated the mapping in our area. So, along the Red River on the Fargo-Moorhead side, it's about 39.5 feet is what the current floodplain is. So, when you're building it in those areas with the floodplain, you've got to build above that to stay above the floodplain for flood insurance purposes, and which can be a challenge when it comes to cost, because you have to have floodproof basements, you need to elevate, bring in more dirt to build up housing developments and your foundation. So all of that adds cost. With this project, as I mentioned earlier, we'll have 37 feet through town. So that'll be the new 100-year floodplain is 37 feet. So about 2.5 feet below, which is substantial. This project is not about building new growth area, but it's obviously going to have, it's about protecting our current infrastructure, current homes and properties, but it does allow us to more effectively build into new areas at a cheaper rate compared to what we're paying today because of not having to build up. So right now, through FEMA, we've been working diligently with them to start the process, so that way once the project's complete, we don't have to start from scratch to get the area remapped. And so we're working through that. We expect it's still going to take 3 years from project completion, so we're expecting around 2030 to have everything finalized in the area remapped. Until that time, people will still have to follow the current standards for floodplain development. But once that new map is adopted in 2030, then the floodplain will change, and then it'll build to that new standard.
I see. Well, thank you for explaining that. And you brought up, how the ripple effect, I suppose, of the economic development that this can just help protect, right? And I'm curious, Tony, from your perspective too, we talk about this all the time, like the future of the region and development and talent attraction and workforce and all of those things. Many of our Innovate 28 discussions are about all of those factors. But from your perspective, and maybe even as a Cass County Commissioner, why is this project in its completion, how is this going to change, the next 50 years of this region? And what would be missing or what would be lost out on if we didn't do this project? Basically what I'm getting at is what's the impact over time that this will have?
Yeah, great question, Tyler. I mean, I think in some sense, there are many residents that have moved to the area that have no history or understanding of what we have experienced in the past with flood fighting. And so in many ways, the diversion project will represent certainty that there is permanent flood protection, and that'll preserve the assets of business and industry and residential homes and protect them from future threats. From an economic standpoint, as Jason alluded to, when no longer flood insurance premiums are residents in particular are responsible for, they're going to have additional income at their disposal for other purposes, other interests that they may have. When you look at the cost of construction, when certain standards maybe are changed because of the new certification, you'll be able to build cheaper. At present, there's certain levels of basements that have to be at certain elevations. That requires additional amount of expense with fill and grading to a cost of a new home construction, for example. So those are some of the benefits that will be attained over time once this certification is completed and decisions on growth. And to your point, for listeners who Innovate 28 is, a revisit, if you will, a return of economic development and chamber working together, engaging the private sector to facilitate growth and add jobs and economic development and provide opportunities for folks to live and work in this area. That preserves tax base and allows us to provide the quality of life that we all experience. And quite honestly, when you drive around Fargo-Moorhead and look at the quality of the infrastructure and the things that we benefit from in this region, we want to ensure from a Cass County Commissioner role and being a supporter of Innovate 28 with public funds, we want to ensure that the private sector is stepping up in an equal way with all the goal of strategic plan to grow our economy and provide a quality environment for people to work, live, and play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to your point, it is fun to just stop for a minute and think about, as you look around. And even on the show, we've been lucky enough to talk about many projects, the airport expansion, convention center, downtown Moorhead, Dilworth is expanding. Everywhere you look, there's growth and new opportunity. And so it's fun to watch all of these pieces come together. That makes, I have a few questions, and maybe I'll start here with you, Jason. This is just selfishly a question that I'm curious about. What has been something that surprised you about the project? Maybe something that was a big challenge that you guys overcame, or some sort of innovation where you're like, wow, this is pretty cool that we've accomplished. I'm pretty curious about that.
Yeah, a couple things. One, just the collaboration from the start to be able to get all of the entities that make up the diversion authority between Fargo, Moorhead, Cass County, Clay County, the water resource districts, West Fargo, just all of that collaboration. You go to other parts of the country, they don't understand how we got this accomplished, because they're used to infighting and squabbling between communities versus the relationships that we have across our borders and within our communities. And then from the engineering standpoint, this is a very unique structure. Someone told me once, you don't often get to work on a project that you could see with the naked eye from the International Space Station. It's that big of a project. To drive from the north end up by Georgetown to the southeast tip south of Comstock, it's over 50 miles that you have to drive from one end of the project to the other. And one of the first meetings I was in fall of 2010, before I took over as the county engineer, we were talking about shifting the alignment from the Minnesota alignment that was initially proposed, that was going to go around Dilworth, to the North Dakota alignment that we're currently using. And one of the engineers that was with us got up on the whiteboard and sketched out those aqueduct structures of carrying the natural river waters over the diversion channel. And all of our heads were just like, boom, like, what is going on? What is this guy talking about? And we're building them now. We're in the next year, we're going to have them all finished. So it's a very unique project. And then how we got through the P3 to get the collaboration, the funding. There's just been a lot of hard work, and there's not one person that takes all the credit. This has been a community effort from a vast number of leaders, and a lot of leaders that were very involved in 2010 to 2012, 14, and moved on. Thank goodness they put that effort in back then. To the leaders that we've got today, there's been a lot of great collaboration.
Yep. Yeah, the collaboration is amazing, and I believe it. I'm sure you guys get questioned like, how did you pull this off and pull all these groups together? And kudos to all of you for doing that. That is very impressive. We're coming up to our last break, but really quick, what I do want to do is on this episode, when we post it on the Chamber's website, is give our listeners some resources. What's a website that we could send people to keep up with the project, see updates?
Yeah, fmdiversion.gov.
Okay.
That's the best resource. And then we have a whole slew of YouTube videos out there. So every month, near the end of the month, we'll post our monthly construction update. So really encourage people to get online and get on YouTube to follow that, as well as other significant events like the Red River structure. We've got some videos covering that. So between our website, fmdiversion.gov, and then again, YouTube.
That's perfect. Thank you. All right, we're on our last break, and then we'll be back for our last segment. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our last segment of the day. And I know we kind of touched on this earlier in the show about, what's next after completion, but I just really want to, first of all, I want to make sure our listeners grasp what's going on with this project, and maybe this is kind of new to some people. And so really, and Jason, maybe I'll throw this up to you, because what did you say, about 13-ish months, we're going to be pretty close to completion, which is a huge milestone. And so it's like, okay, we're completed, in air quotes, because obviously there's work to still be done after it's completed, but it's completed. And then what's next? What are the next steps for you guys?
Yeah, so we're looking, like you said, about 13 months from now to have it completed. We'll be ready to operate if we had a flood in spring of 2027. There'll still be a lot of kind of cleanup and smaller little tasks to finish off in 2027 to get the project completed. And then, over the next couple years after that, there'll be a number of ongoing tasks like making sure that all the grass, on all these embankments and the diversion channel gets established properly. But then, from there on, every year, we'll have critical activities to make sure that we're ready to protect the community, making sure that all the systems are operational and running, all the gates, and doing these inspections. We talked about how the private-public partnership team is going to maintain the diversion channel for 30 years. We'll have an inspection team that goes out and conducts routine inspections to make sure that throughout the summer things are being maintained properly and ready to go, so that every fall when we go into winter, we know we've got a project that's ready to go, ready to operate if we need it the following spring.
So over those next years, what do you foresee as, I guess, some of your workforce needs? What kind of people, what kind of skill sets? I mean, is there a reality if there's a college student listening to this right now and they're not sure what they want to go into, but they like the sounds of this project? What are your needs going to be? What do you foresee that you're going to need out of people?
Yeah, so right now we're pretty small staff as far as the actual number of people that are FM diversion employees.
Yep.
Because a lot of our staff are consultants that are kind of working through the construction, and some of them we'll need for a few years again to kind of finalize all the paperwork and everything. But we'll be bringing on some additional staff, and that's a process that we're working through right now, is to determine how many people we do need. I don't envision some of this tasks to be done by direct employees, like all of the mowing. We'll probably do a number of contracts for those types of activities. There will be some need for some of that operations and maintenance, kind of direct maintenance type activities, but a number of those will also be contracted out. But it's inspections, it's managing, it's interaction with landowners. We've got a lot of environmental mitigation projects that we're doing with this project, making sure that we're continuing those mitigation projects and tracking everything properly in accordance to different permits and regulations. Then, as I mentioned, landowners, we're interacting with a lot of landowners, rural townships, and making sure that we're abiding by all the promises that we've made as we've kind of led up to this project and all the agreements that we've signed on to.
This just came to mind too as we're getting close to wrapping up, just because when I look at you, Tony, sometimes I just think of public policy because of your background and your history. Is there anything, and this is kind of from the Chamber's perspective, is there anything that we need to work together on and kind of wrap up when it comes to legislative sessions, or any lingering things that we need to focus on or that you're going to maybe engage the Chamber in the future?
Certainly, yeah. We've got some work to do with our financial model yet that's remaining, and we've got the right team focused on that. As you mentioned, Mr. Dunwoody and his effort to assist with the Minnesota legislature last year. We'll be working with the Minnesota legislators again this next session in Minnesota to wrap up some of the work in Minnesota for their consideration to continue to support financially. So that'll be a direct, I would assume, Chamber engagement.
Yep.
As well as, I think, imagine a year from now with an event. What's the Chamber's role in helping promote the success of the substantial completion, and if it's called a community celebration or region celebration, and continue to inform the public and Chamber members of the value of this project and what it means. I think, tell somebody once and tell them again and tell them again. I think it's going to be very important that as we a year from now wave the flag of obviously progress and success, to continue to tell the story of why and what happened and the legacy of this project, what it means for the future. And I think the Chamber has a role in that for years to come.
Well, thank you for that. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. I know I learned a lot today. I feel lucky to be a host of a show like this because I learn a lot. So thank you for sharing your knowledge and the history and the impacts of this. I really appreciated it. And I have one quick announcement before we leave today. Coming up soon, the Chamber's Pulse event. And Tony, I know you're familiar with that event. The Pulse, we're going to be talking about tariffs and trade. And this is on September 9th. So definitely tune in for that. You can learn more on the Chamber's website. We're going to be talking about the U.S. economy, of course, trades, tariffs, federal legislation, the impact on North Dakota and Minnesota's production and exports, you name it. So it's going to be a pretty fascinating topic. So tune in September 9th. And for this show, we will be back next week. So we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler.